Hello and welcome to another edition of Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast. I'm Captain Rick Riles. Hey, we're going to do things a little differently tonight. It is the first podcast of 2023, so please allow me to wish you a Happy New Year. Gosh, I hope you guys had as much fun fishing in Florida in 22 as I did. Some of our fishing was really good this year. Some of it continues to struggle to get a foothold in view of the fact that roughly 1,000 people plus a day move to Florida. We got to make room for all those people. We got to have fish for them. The Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast is brought to you this week and every week by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people and nature together. By Tournament Master Chum. Oh, it's the best chum on earth, all right. By Nosara Paradise Rentals, your dream vacation. By D.O.A. Lures, the unfair advantage. By Young Boats. You want the finest in flat spay and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. By the Castaway Hat Company. That's the hat that's helping save our seas. And by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Right stuff, low price, every day. Well, I tell you what, maybe the time of just watching our fish stocks decline is nearing an end. I have always been a big fan of the CCA. They've done some tremendous work throughout Florida. Gosh, I know they've been working very hard in some of the areas that were hit with that horrible red tide a couple years ago. But they have come over to the East Coast. They've got an initiative going tonight that instead of getting the reports from the guys that have largely been blown out this week, for the East Coast this week, we're going to talk to one Leiza Fitzgerald, who has been involved in a great project called Release the East. Happy New Year, Leiza.
Well, Happy New Year, Rick. And, yes, I do and am very excited for 2023 and what is going to happen for the East Coast. Since 2021, in April, we have had an ongoing commitment to preserve natural fisheries and the ecosystems for future generations throughout Florida. And now we've moved over and are doing this on the East Coast. To date, we've released over 100,000 juvenile redfish on the East Coast of Florida from Martin County all the way up to Volusia. And 2023 is going to take us from Volusia all the way up to Nassau County. And I'm sure everyone up in those areas are going to be happy to find that we are going to be releasing redfish in their home waters.
How about that? Do you have a number that you hope to do in 2023?
Well, we hope to do another 100,000, possibly more.
Wow.
I consider myself a redfish grandmother. I've always said I'm a redfish diva, but now I'm a redfish grandmother because I was involved in the capture of the brood stock, which came from the Cape Canaveral area. We captured those large brood stock females, transported them across the state to the Duke Mariculture Center. And at Duke, they took these big redfish and with artificial intelligence, so to speak, and manipulation of temperature, light, and time, they actually manipulated these big broodstock into spawning. And then we had smaller redfish. They are males, and they were inseminating those eggs. We reared the small reds, and then from there, those reds are brought up in tanks to a certain size, and then they are put out in these massive ponds. And Rick, I know you know, but there is no perfect size to release a redfish.
Sure.
There are ideal sizes, but nothing is perfect. And so what happens when these fish are in the pond? There's shrimp, there's crustaceans, crabs, there's smaller bait fish. There's all kinds of things in these ponds that educate these juvenile redfish and help them to learn to survive in the wild.
Okay, let me stop you just 1 second, clear something up in my own head. Now, when they're when they're in the tanks, they are feeding on commercial fish food. Is that correct?
They are on a commercial diet. Once they get to a larger level, they continue to be supplemented, but they are now learning to forage and feed for themselves.
That's the role of the ponds in the project, right? To teach them how to survive in the wild.
Well, and so if you think about it, in a tank, these fish are going around in a circle in potentially one direction.
Right.
Because of the way the water flows. So what the big ponds allow them to do is to learn to move, to school, to do all of the things that wild fish do.
That's cool. That is so cool.
It's really cool. And it's very, very interesting to go to these ponds and see these fish in these ponds. The water is very muddy looking, but you can see them in schools on the surface and feeding and doing different things. And so it is a unique process. However, we don't want those fish to get too large because transporting them in tanks then poses an issue, especially because we're bringing them anywhere from 3, 4, and 5 hours, depending on where we are taking these fish to.
That is so darn cool. And the thing that comes into my mind is, if you're not releasing fingerlings into the lagoon system, that fish, the ones that you release are, you say, roughly 12 to 14 inches? Is that what you told me?
No, the ones we release are top size are 8.
Okay.
We have
6 to 8 inches.
14, but they're 6 to 8 inches.
Okay. So they're not victim to every predator in the lagoon. I mean, they're big enough to start to live on their own, essentially. And I would guess that they would have a much higher survival rate than a batch of redfish that are born in the wild. Am I right about that?
I don't know, as I am not a biologist, but I will tell you, if you look at a 2-inch fish and a 4-inch fish, everything eats a 2-inch fish.
Right,
not everything can eat a 4-inch fish.
Right.
You're talking your puffers, your pinfish, everything eats a 2-inch fish. Even the small fry are consumed readily by that, so I am confident in saying that I feel, based on the information that I'm provided, that these 4 to 6, 8-inch fish have a much better survival rate than a 1-inch or 2-inch fry fish.
Leiza, have you done any species besides redfish?
Yes, we've done snook and we've done spotted sea trout.
Huh. And you've gotten spotted sea trout essentially to spawn in captivity?
Oh, yes. And
wow.
So far on the West Coast, we've released, I believe it's close to 40,000 spotted sea trout on the West Coast, 5,000 snook on the West Coast. And, it's really going to take, some initiatives to get additional species of fish to be released. But the process can be done as long as you have the facility and the funds. It does cost to rear these fish. You have to have, someone that's on staff watching them all the time, taking care of them. It's just like having babies,
Yeah, sure.
You got to take care of them. And, these are not the only projects, this Release the East project. I think, everyone needs to be aware that, the other projects that we have that are directly related to the improvement of the Indian River Lagoon and the East Coast is clam restoration. We have a huge clam restoration project that has released hundreds of millions of clams into the Indian River Lagoon system, as well as oyster bed renourishment, shoreline stabilization with live oysters. And all of these are ways to improve water quality because clams and oysters are filtration feeders.
Right. And
I know, Rick,
very
your
beneficial.
passion is offshore.
Well, yeah, you're right. I'll admit it.
And I can tell you, CCA is not just an inshore, nearshore organization. We've been reestablishing reefs all throughout the east coast of Florida. And these reef systems that we've been putting in are beneficial to the smaller reef fish, which in turn attract your larger pelagic species. So I can tell you, we this year have put 44 reef projects throughout the state of Florida, and we hope to double that next year.
Leiza, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I have fought at South Atlantic Council meetings and in other conservation group meetings and all. There is a segment of our society that says that artificial reefs accumulate the fish that were in the area anyway and make them more available for slaughter. I don't buy a word of that. I am in fact, I've seen it. I've dove enough, Leiza. I've dove over so many wrecks. A wreck goes down, and 2 weeks later, there's stuff starting to grow on it. And a month later, there's something starting to feed on the stuff that's growing on it. And 3 months later, there's a red snapper chasing that cigar minnow around who was eating what was in the barnacle on the ship. So no, you can't convince me that they don't become their own ecosystem, in my opinion.
It's just relocation. We're not making it easier for people to catch fish because you've created an artificial reef. You've created an artificial reef that establishes new homes.
Right.
And, if we spread out where anglers are fishing, you have a better fishery. You have a better time on the water as an angler, because you don't have Joe Blow coming up to your boat thinking you have free chicken wing and beer signs hung out on your boat, and they're coming within 25 yards of you.
Oh, I know, because that's the only place to fish. Yeah, because that's the only place to fish is on the reef. And I'm with you. I think the solution is more reefs.
Exactly. And creating these reefs allow juvenile fish to have homes where they're not crowded, where they have areas to grow up, and you may relocate some fish, but these are new homes with new fish moving into them and finding places to reestablish themselves. And I can tell you, as you said, if you look up at the St. Johns River, there is a beautiful reef system that CCA established in the St. Johns River that is completely covered with fish.
Has sheep's head all over it, sweetheart. It sure does.
It's got sheep's head. When the big redfish, spawning redfish are in, they're up on that reef. It's amazing to see what these reef systems do. But not only are they fish attractants, but they're also preservation of the reef bottom. And the nearshore reefs that we establish both on the west coast and the east coast are actually protecting our shorelines. So there's so much good that comes out of the projects that we are initiating and getting into. And I'm excited for the Release the East, because I think the East Coast really needs to understand that there's a lot of work to be done, and Mother Nature is resilient.
Oh boy, is
but
she ever?
She can't do it by herself. Go ahead.
I agree with that. I've got this bug in my head that's just bothering me the heck out of this. All right, so you're releasing these reds, and you're going to release them all the way up the East Coast, all the way up Nassau County, north of us here in Jacksonville. Okay. How do you determine which county gets how many redfish?
So what we try to do is equally distribute the fish between the counties. And so, for instance, let's look at Duval County. Duval County is so large. So Duval might get a larger lion's share of the fish that are released, but we also have to look at habitat. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at Nassau County has gorgeous oysters and gorgeous areas. So they have really great habitat for redfish. You look at Flagler County. Flagler County also has a lot of great areas, but they have a more of a limited area of where these fish can go. We will be putting fish out in Flagler and in those areas that have great oyster bays and things of that nature. But there has to be excellent habitat for us to be able to release these juvenile fish. And I want to back up on that just a tad, because you have the Indian River Lagoon system, and there are areas there that don't have excellent habitat, but they have good habitat. Mm-hmm. And they need those fish in order to have great fishing. And so we want to put those fish in areas that have mangroves and oysters and protection from those bigger predators. And that's what we're doing.
Well, if I'm right, if I understand you correctly, you're doing both at the same time. When you put down however many million clams, however many acres of oyster bars that you guys have put down, you're not only improving the water quality, but you're also giving excellent habitat for the fish that live there. And I've got this idea in my head. Leiza, can you foresee a day where, much like you work with Star now, and everybody loves the success of that tournament, can you foresee a day where a county like Duval would say, we want to release 200,000 in Duval next year? What's the ticket? What's the cost to it? And where counties, municipalities, fishing clubs, whatever, could they ever fund? It's just like, and I know that cobia have been raised in several environments. I know of places where cobia have been raised, and I know where they've actually been raised commercially. Are we ever going to get to a time where, let's say, the Jacksonville Offshore Sport Fishing Club could say, all right, it costs $2, $5, $1, whatever, to raise a cobia up to a releasable size. Here's a $1,000 grant. We want 1,000 cobia released in Duval County this year. Can that happen?
Well, I believe that everything is possible when it comes to this type of initiative. I will share with you. I've had. I'll give you a perfect example. The Siesta Key Fishing Club.
Right.
I spoke to them, and they were so excited about all of the opportunities. They later wrote a check and asked that money go towards funding release of spotted sea trout in Sarasota Bay. We released 15,000 sea trout in Sarasota Bay.
Leiza, I'm reminded so much now of 90% of the trout streams in the United States. In 90% of the trout streams in the United States, guys are fishing for hatchery fish.
Exactly. And well, you look at Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan.
Oh, good gracious, yes. When I lived,
what an amazing story Lake Michigan has for their, for their supplementing of restocking programs. There are so many freshwater restocking programs that are so successful and beneficial, and I do believe that it is just a matter of time before we see an actual hatchery somewhere on the east coast of Florida that will have the capability of rearing different species of fish. And I think it's a necessity. As I said, Mother Nature is resilient, but she cannot keep up with, just as you said, the thousands of people that are coming into our state and taking of our natural resources. we have to be cognizant of what is being done to our natural resources, both saltwater, freshwater, our habitat loss for wild animals. There is so much that is happening with the state of Florida that Mother Nature can't keep up with. So each of us as individuals, have to do something, whether it is getting involved with CCA. And I can tell you, I have been a member of CCA for 20 plus years. Before I ever became an employee, I was a member and supporting them and doing trash cleanups and restocking initiatives. I was fortunate enough to release the 1 millionth redfish into Tampa Bay with Governor Jeb Bush. I have so many fond memories of working with Gina Riso with FWC and tagging and putting fish out. There's a need for each and every one of us to do a small, simple something. And it's very easy.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
There's a way that they can go on to our CCA website and be engaged in donating to the Release the East initiative. Or if your listeners are on the West Coast, they can do the same thing for the West Coast. If they want to be involved, become a member. It's so inexpensive. It's $35 to be a member of CCA.
Goodness. Well, I got to tell you what, I'm so highly impressed and so optimistic about everything that you're telling us and the way that things are. And Leiza, the one thing I can tell you is we may be getting new fishermen every day, but times are changing. You spend more time with doing the work. I spend more time doing the fishing. And I can tell you that anglers' attitudes are changing. All right. And it's not all about everything you can bring home anymore. The new fishermen have got to be taught what a lot of us old timers have learned, but a lot of us old timers have learned that limits are necessary. They need to be tight. We got more people than ever, and it's fine to take a fish home for dinner, but it ain't all about what you can kill anymore like it used to be.
No. And a lot of people were not very happy with the fact that your limit and your bag for Northeast was changed from 2 fish to 1. But I can tell you that was a CCA initiative. That was something that we fought tooth and nail to make sure that it was 1 fish bag limit throughout the state, because that makes a huge difference.
I've got it. Well, obviously it has the potential to cut your harvest in half, but and I've got to tell you, the guides up here, the guys that are on top of their game, so many of them that do it commercially as charter captains, never told their customers it went to 2. A lot of them had been fishing on a 1 fish limit on their boat. My good friend that has a party boat that for years when they caught cobia, he told the people that the law on cobia was 1 per person, 6 per boat before there ever was a limit. And so thankfully, I think the fishermen's attitude are falling in line with what has to happen. And Leiza, I'm jonesing for the day when I can say, yes, I had a good year business-wise this year. I'd like to buy 100 cobia to be released off Jacksonville tomorrow.
Well, I am, as I said, optimistic. I do believe eventually there was a program years ago to raise money through the state and another project to put a big hatchery in New Smyrna, so that we were able to do, some really great things. And unfortunately, the funding never happened. But I do believe our future, just like many of our in-state states up in the north and northeast, our future is, I'm not going to say going to a full supplement of fish, but restocking of species is wise. And I know there are a lot of naysayers, but if only 5%, and I'm not saying that is the number, but if only 5% of the fish that we release survive, each fish generates hundreds of thousands of juveniles. And that's where we see it's almost like a Ponzi scheme. It keeps building and building and building. That is where we are going to see some really great things happening. I can tell you, my heart swelled and almost burst. I was at a CCA banquet, and a man walked up to me, and he said, "Hey, I quit fishing a certain area because I never caught redfish over there." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." He goes, "But the reason I'm saying this is because recently I went back over to this area again, and I started fishing because I had heard that you all had released juvenile reds over there earlier in the spring." And I said, "Yes." And he says, "I sat over there one day and started catching 12 to 14-inch redfish on every cast." He said, "I stopped, but I know those fish were the fish that you released."
Well, they may well have been. And if anybody needs further proof, the next time you take a redfish out of the water in the East Coast intercoastal waterways of Florida, take a look in his mouth, and I'll almost bet you dimes to dollars you'll find hook holes, because we are recatching these fish. These fish are caught on a regular basis, Leiza, and
I know that they are.
Got to keep the numbers up. Now, real quick before I let you go, the other big thing that's really destroying us is a lack of seagrass. Any hope there?
There are many, many seagrass projects that are being initiated and being worked on. We have been working with several different groups to determine seagrass replantings. I can tell you we're getting reports of seagrass reestablishing themselves. One of the number one benefits from clam bed restoration is seagrass.
Really?
Yes. Well, think about this. Wherever you find really great seagrasses, what do you find underneath them?
Clams.
Clams. The defecation from the clams brings these seagrasses and makes it fertile, and your clams will grow. So the cool thing about that clam restoration project is that wherever we have put these clams, we're starting to see rhizomes. We're starting to see rhizomes throughout the Indian River Lagoon. Even Martin County is telling me that some of the sandbars that are completely depleted, they're starting to see seagrass starting to sprout and seeing rhizomes in the sand. So, there are a lot of restocking programs. Duke Mariculture is raising seagrasses. There are a lot of the mariculture centers that are raising seagrasses, and we're working to get them reestablished. We have to be very conscientious of where those seagrasses are replanted based on what consumes seagrasses. So we just, you have to be very conscientious of where everything eats seagrass, pinfish, crabs, manatees.
I was going to say, Leiza, I'll buy a head of lettuce for every manatee in Florida if they'll bring back the seagrass like I waded in when I was a boy. I promise you.
Well, unfortunately, the lettuce situation, I do not believe is
that was a joke. That was a joke.
I know it was,
I didn't mean it.
I can only tell you that, times are changing. People have to change their mentality. We have to be more cognizant of what we put on our lawns, what we put in our waterways, picking up trash. We created in the Star competition a trash division, and we clean up hundreds and hundreds of pounds of trash every summer. I mean, up to 10 tons of garbage in a summer. That's a lot of trash.
That's a lot of trash coming out. Yep. And guys are getting better about that too. Leiza, I can't thank you enough. This is really encouraging stuff. Plugging 100,000 redfish back into that area of Central Florida that's been so depleted by
Well,
bad
we
water,
will
if
keep
you will?
doing this as long as people like you and others will continue to support the effort. You know, you can go to the website ccaflorida.org and see all of the great works that we're doing. To date, it's $9.2 million in habitat restoration in partners with organizations like Mudhole Custom, Realtree Fishing, Contender, Yamaha. All of these wonderful organizations are so engaged. And Mudhole Custom, if you're not familiar with them,
I am.
is the front runner in Release the East program in getting it funded and doing our restocking initiative. So kudos to Scott Gimbert and Mudhole for all of their passion in reestablishing the Release the East initiative.
Darn right. It's their life and it's their livelihood, and they know it. And they're smart enough to know that with no fishing, there is no Mudhole Custom Tackle. And there is no Contender, and there is no Yamaha. Good deal.
And we're very proud of it, and we're so thankful. And Rick, I'm so thankful that you are not only a great friend, but also a great friend of our conservation efforts. And we continue to try to strive to do what really makes a difference in conservation measures.
Yep. If you're not doing more than griping about it, you're part of the problem. Leiza,
exactly.
Thank you so much, sweetheart. Don't be a stranger. I hope to talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank
and Happy
you,
New
Leiza.
Year to all your listeners.
And Happy New Year to you, my dear. Leiza Fitzgerald from CCA. That was really interesting. 100,000 reds have gone back into Mosquito Lagoon. Let's track that and see how that goes for the guys.
You know what Yamaha Outboards love? The genuine formula and consistency of Yamalu marine engine oils. Outboards are subjected to punishing conditions like high loads, salt, and humidity, a mix that automotive oils can't handle. Yamalu full synthetic and marine performance formulas are certified to protect against friction and corrosion for reliable performance every time. Find Yamalu marine oils at your nearest Yamaha Outboard dealer. Locate them at yamahaaoutboards.com/dealers. Yamaha, reliability starts here.
Hey, Raj, being consistent is a mark of a quality product. If you've been Florida's #1 chum for over 10 years, there's got to be a reason.
For 10 years, Tournament Master Chum has lived up to its name. That's why more tournament pros insist on Tournament Master than any other chum. It's the only chum with Menhaden milk mixed right in. That means it gets the scent out faster and deeper than any other brand of chum. It comes in a grind size for every species from kingfish to catching bait. Your fishing time is way too precious to you second-rate chum. Bring the action to you by insisting on Tournament Master Chum. It's worth every penny.
When you're ready for the finest in custom-made flat spay or inshore-offshore hybrids, you are ready to meet the Young family in Inglis, Florida. For over 21 years, the Young family has built custom boats one at a time for every type of fishing. Nothing can sneak up on a flat quite like the Gulf Shore flats boats, and I've never fished a better hybrid than the Young 24s and 27s. Rob Young is a naval architect who takes tremendous pride in each and every build for each and every customer that wants their boat custom built exactly the way they want it. Is it time for you to move up? Are you ready to own the finest boat built? Then you need to visit the Young Boat facility in Inglis, Florida, or check them out online at youngboats.com. Our thanks again to Leiza Fitzgerald for bringing us the update on Release the East. Really exciting stuff. Man, I can't wait till they get cobia going, grouper going, releasing all kind of fish back into our waters, just like freshwater fisheries have done forever. All right, let's get started up the West Coast with our 10,000 Island man, Steve Dahl. Cap, how we doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. Happy New Year, Rick.
Good. How was your behavior last night? Oh, no, I guess it was night before last. Excuse me.
Oh, I was in bed by 10 o'clock.
Yeah, I don't remember the last time. Well, you know what? It might have even been this year because that doggone Georgia game didn't end until almost midnight, so I don't know. I might have made it.
Sure did.
But let's talk fishing. How's it been for you this week?
Well, it's we're coming off a really big cold front. The first major one of the year where stuff got around Christmas time, and we're settling right back in. We our morning water temps in the backcountry are like 68 degrees. They're peaking at the magic mark of 72. The Gulf of Mexico is sitting right about 70, 71, and it couldn't be any better. You know, it's that time of year. It finally has kind of settled in. And, you know, typical wintertime fishing, lots of trout to be had. The redfish are a little, a little spotty right now. You know, catching some snook as the water's starting to, you know, come back up. But it's really, the focus is really trout fishing this time of year. The black drum is starting to show up as well, which is another big wintertime fish. And then, of course, the sheep's head. So on the inshore side, it's really those, the trout, black drum, and the sheep's head. And then something I've been waiting for a long time, as you well know, and if everyone follows in week to week, they know how much I love the triple tail fish.
Oh, yeah.
Last 2 years, we've had a really challenging one. We just don't seem to have those numbers, and we certainly don't seem to have the mature fish. And this week I stumbled on a 13.5 pounder.
That's a fine one.
Oh yeah, and a 15 pounder.
That's a better one.
That's a better one. And so we've got you know, two nice fish to start the year. You know, over 10 pounds. You know, we usually average probably about, you know, anywhere from 6 to 10 of those a year, and that's an entire year. And the last 2 years, I haven't cracked that, you know, maybe 2-3 times. So doesn't seem to be necessarily a fluke. We're seeing a lot of fish in that 16 to 17 inch range. Obviously, keepers are 18 inches. I think a lot of people forget that they made that switch a couple years back from 15 to 18. So keep that in mind. So keepers are definitely hard to come by, but if you really want to learn how to do this, there's plenty of 12 to 17 inchers out there. And you really don't have to run all that far. I always say, you know, those first couple lines, you know, visible out in the Gulf are generally the ones hit the hardest. You know, so maybe reach out a little bit, you know, maybe a couple lines, you know, deeper, you know, to kind of get away. Those always seem to be the ones that are always hit, you know, those front ones. So try to, you know, get yourself, if you have the conditions to be able to do it. Keep bright sunny skies, you know, in mind. I like to kind of do my day, you know, go about my day as regular, and then in the afternoon or right before we're coming in, we allocate some time to triple tail fish because the sun is as high as it's going to be, and that sun certainly helps you. So, you know, keep that in mind. I think a lot of guys will get really excited and want to spend a whole day trying to do this, and you know, in the morning it can be really difficult to see, you know, down there. And
it's funny. It's so funny you say that, Steve. I don't know how many mornings I've left the dock to go triple tail fishing and thought, what am I doing? You know, 7:30 I'm going to see the first fish at 10 o'clock. I might as well wait, but I just can't do it.
It's always been a rule of mine. I got customers who exclusively want to do it. And I said, look, you know, if you wanted to, if that's all you want to do for 5 hours, we're going to start at just what you said, by 10 o'clock, and, you know, sleep in, have breakfast, you know, but if that's truly what you want to do, you know, leave it to the latter part of the day, you know, get your other species out of the way in the morning, and then, you know, really focus on you know, late morning into the afternoon, because that's the time to go. Unfortunately, your wind may kick up a little bit. Mm-hmm. So you definitely got to play your cards right. I tend to like a little bit of wind and a chop just because it masks you in a boat.
Right.
You know, so those flat, calm days, while easy to see them, you definitely can spook them pretty good too. So you got to really, really keep your distance. And if you don't have anglers on board that can make that cast, you're probably going to spook a lot of fish. So, you know, now's the time to start running. You know, it's I'm excited. I'm hoping I'm going to expand my horizons quite a bit in the next couple of weeks.
Good deal.
And dedicate some time to the new water. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, I know your triple tail season was kind of a disappointment to you for 22. Yeah. What was your best fishing day in 2022?
You know, hands down, I had the opportunity. You know, you got a lot of people in your life that hand down the gift of fishing to you.
Right.
And at some point, you got to really pay that back. And my high school baseball coach really got me into this. I grew up in the Midwest, and he ran a program for a Canadian fishing lodge to take high school boys up that way. We had a group of probably 10 guys from my high school that went up, and that pretty much changed my life. I mean, just kind of doing a Northwoods trip with the guys, and
Oh, yeah.
he was pretty instrumental in making sure that trip happened. And I finally got the chance to repay him for that, a trip on the house. He hires me just about every year, but I finally, I fight him every year. And this year I finally said, we're not doing a charter. This is just two of us going fishing. And, we took all the pressure off of for a hire trip, and we had a couple beers, and we just smashed them. and so we joke now that, maybe the charters need to be free going forward.
That's right. I can see that logic. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of, I burned myself a little bit there, but it felt really good to kind of give back to somebody that, if he didn't talk me into that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. So, that was probably my most notable moment, just being able to share a moment, regardless of the fact we smashed them that day. It was still, just a feel-good moment, and as I get older, I kind of reflect on that of, all the people that touch me in the industry, and, it's time to really make sure that those people are recognized.
Well, here's two things I know. First off, whatever your vocational choice would have been, you'd have been successful. And second off, you would not have had as much fun as you and I have both had spending our lives on the water.
Absolutely. We're blessed. I mean, that's it. You and I say it all the time. And I love that you and I have that same mindset, because you cannot take this life for granted. This is, we live a blessed life.
No, sir. I'll be 70 in 10 days, Steve Dahl.
I know.
I'm gonna keep right on rolling. All right,
I know
Bubba.
you are.
I appreciate it so much, Steve. We'll talk with you next week.
All right. Sounds good, Rick. Be
Captain
well.
Steve Dahl from 10,000 Islands. The year was 1953 when one of the true pioneers of big game fishing just hung it up. No, it wasn't any of our podcasters. It was none other than Ernest Hemingway. I just don't want to do it anymore, he's credited with saying. The tackle has become so sophisticated, the fish just don't have a chance. Can you imagine walking him through the aisles of Strike Zone Fishing and showing him the latest and greatest from Shimano? Can you imagine handing him a Saragusa spinner that weighs less than his bait did and could put more torque on a rampaging tuna than the giant old reels of his day? No, Ernest, I'm afraid you left us way too early. The fights with great fish still go on today, and sometimes we still get beat. But if I were a sea monster of your day, I think I'd still rather do battle with you than face the tools that Shimano has stocked in Strike Zone Fishing 68 years later. Our thanks to Steve Dahl for a great 10,000 Islands. Now let's move up the coast a little bit and check in with a guy who probably really appreciates his fishing for now, because he lost it for a while after the hurricane. Are you glad to be back fishing, Greg Stamper?
I am. I'm not. It's not crazy busy because we have a lot of circumstances that we have to deal with. But I got out a few times this week, and I'll be honest, I don't mind spending an extra hour or two out there just having fun.
There you go, Cap. Now you're talking my language. How was the fishing for you?
So, the water did start to warm up. I almost got to 72 degrees today in some of the back bays when we were out there late. But the fishing has just been okay. It's been really good for trout. It's been really good for pompano. Sheepshead bite has been okay. Nothing crazy. Not a lot of big boys in the back bays yet. But this week, Rick, I was really kind of disappointed with the redfish. It seems like with these tides, we have different tides than what you have on the East Coast. We don't get tides just come in and go out and kind of do the same amount of depth each way. Ours are a little bit sporadic, and I think that kind of slowed them down.
Okay. That would make sense. I've always been a fan of a stronger moving current for better biting fish.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
All right. Now, when you talk about trout, it almost is starting to feel, in fact, I was just talking with Leiza Fitzgerald. She fished Tampa Bay, I think, yesterday, and they had 100 trout day. Now, those aren't common anywhere anymore, but it almost feels to me like trout might be starting to get a little better this winter than they were last winter. You feel that way?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, we've gone through a transition since 2017, 2018,
Sure.
where we had a few years where there were none. But overall, every time we go out, we can usually rely on getting some trout right now. 100 Leiza, really? Oh my goodness, that's a little bit heavy for us. But we can get 20 or 30 definitely in an hour or two, as long as people pay attention to their cork going down. But overall, I mean, we can do that right now. The thing is that I have not seen yet this year, which I thought I would have already, especially with the lack of pressure, is the bigger fish. So all these fish we're catching right now, Rick, anywhere from say that just below legal, so say 14 inches, and then the big ones right now are only up to about 18, 19 inches. Whereas last year, even in the summer towards the end, we were catching fish that were 26, 27 inches. And that would happen every few days. So I don't know. We'll see what's going on. There's a lot of things changing in my world, Rick. So I don't know. We'll have to talk more about that, I guess, in the long run.
Okay. All right. Well, I certainly hope it'd be hard for 23 not to be a better year for you. So I'm going to go ahead and claim 23 as a much better year for Snook Stamp Charters and Captain Greg Stamper.
Thank you, buddy.
All right, pal. We'll talk with you next week. Captain Greg Stamper, who says they're doing good on trout. Redfish been a little quiet for him this week. I'll bet you don't even remember the days that all us cool kids would rub baby oil mixed with iodine to help us get even darker in the summertime. Being burnt was cool, and even if you weren't a surfing legend, you sure looked the part. Oh, man, if a bunch of us old guys paid the price for our vanity. We never knew the skin problem and health damage that awaited us. Today's fishermen have the options of being so much healthier in the sun than we ever thought of. Thanks in no small part to the Castaway Hat Company, who not only provides our podcasters with Castaway straw hats, but they make the coolest prints on the underside of the brims you ever saw. You may think your bimini top or T-top blocks the sun, but as an awful lot of us OGs can tell you, you can't have enough protection from sun damage. Do what we do. Put on the sunblock and put on your Castaway straw hat. You'll look the part of today's best anglers, and you'll even be helping the environment. That's because for each Castaway hat sold, the Castaway Company is going to pay to have 1 pound of trash removed from our waterways. The burning Florida sun won't be raced in your skin, and believe me, when you age a few years, you'll thank us old guys with a lifetime on the water. So go to CastawayHatCo.com and get your best sun protection today. The Castaway Hat Company. They've got a hat for every adventure. Now, let's move up to West Central and talk to Captain Grumpy himself, Ray Markham. Raymond, how we doing, buddy?
I'm ready for a nap.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's everybody who's shocked by that, raise their hand. My hand's not up. Tell me about your fishing while you were awake this week.
Well, I had a little some issues with my outboard motor that kind of screwed things up. Did not allow us to go where we really needed to be going, but the areas that I fished were not good. I didn't see any signs of red tide or anything, but like I'm saying, they just did not produce for us. We talked to, of course, it was 46 degrees when we launched. Yeah, but water temperature, I think, was just over 50, 52, something like that. And it was extremely slow. The only fish that I heard anybody catching were sheep's head, and fairly good numbers of sheep's head. So, those fish, they don't know when to not bite. I don't know. There is something for everybody to try and take off and catch when things are tough in the cold weather. But that was probably about the best thing going. And I've not heard anybody do anything offshore. Not that they haven't. It's just I hadn't heard about it. But I have heard that some guys were still catching kingfish, believe it or not, that were out fishing just inside of where the middle grounds were.
Yeah.
So they were still catching some big gag grouper. Of course, after the first of the year, they had to release them. Catching red grouper now since they're back open. Not that they weren't catching them before. It's just they had to release them. But outside of that, I honestly haven't heard a lot of good reports. Now, you're telling me that somebody said they caught a bunch of trout in Tampa Bay?
In Tampa Bay, yeah. That this week there were at least one very large catch of trout in Tampa Bay. So I was just glad to hear that it sounds like the red tide is not there. That. Yeah.
Well, I don't think there's really a lot of red tide inside Tampa Bay.
Good.
Other than the reports that I've heard, the reports basically were that there was low levels to medium levels, and it's just near the mouth of the bay. And then back around Fort DeSoto and up the coast a little bit towards John's Pass. But other than that, there wasn't a lot of red tides in the last report that I saw. We got another one coming out in a couple of days, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But it's the weather's been nice. I mean, today was actually really warm, and this being Monday, sitting there at the bowl game over in Tampa, and we were all sweating.
Yeah, it's crazy. Last week it was 40-something, and now we're sweating. Yeah, I know it.
It's crazy. Yeah.
All right, buddy. Well, that's incidentally, you were talking about sheep's head, and you said, I don't know when they don't bite. Around here, they don't bite in the summertime worth a flip.
No, not so much.
For us, it's a winter and spring fish here.
Well, we started seeing sheep's head coming in early this year, as far as I'm concerned.
Good.
More like September, October, which normally, November, December, we start seeing more showing up. But they kind of came up a lot earlier, and some pretty good sized fish too. So, I would imagine the spawning period is probably still going to be about the same over the next couple of months or so. But time will tell, I reckon.
Good deal. So. All right, Cap, listen, we appreciate the heck out of it, and please tell me we can check with you next week.
Yes, sir.
All right,
as soon as I get my boat back, I'll have a report for you.
Go back to your nap. I'll talk to you later. Thanks, Raymond.
All right, bye-bye.
Captain Ray Sleepy Markham with a report from Tampa Bay. Now, he has not encountered a lot of trout. Leiza earlier said yesterday that they found a whole lot of trout. So maybe that red tide is breaking into pockets. It does seem to be dissipating, and that's indeed good news. Hey, it's finally fall, and how many of us have been waiting for the magic of the mullet run to start? There are literally miles of mullet moving along just about every area of Florida coastline. What you need to cash in on the tarpon, snook, reds, trout, sharks, etc. that are feeding on the poor fingerlings is the perfect mullet imitation. Well, for my money, you can skip all the high-dollar made-in-China mullet imitators. For me and all the podcasters I've talked with, the perfect mullet imitation is made right here in Stuart, Florida, and it's the D.O.A. Bait Buster. Mark Nichols, the owner and manufacturer of D.O.A., spent years designing different bait busters to swim shallow, medium, or deep. What makes the bait buster so special? I'll tell you what I think. I think it's the tail. If your bait buster is moving, the tail is flapping. No predator can stand that tail flapping in his face. The D.O.A. Bait Buster. It's the perfect mullet run bait. All right, thanks to grumpy old Ray Markham for a great West Central report. Now let's move on up to the mayor of Homosassa, one William Toney. How we doing, Skip?
We're doing good. You know what? If we were to take this day right now, being a Monday, and reverse it 7 days back to the last Monday, I don't even know what to think, because the last Monday it never got above 45 here.
Right, I remember
and
that.
Today it's like 80 something degrees. So, it's an up and down thing. But what I can tell you about the fishing here on the Big Bend, now is coming around. We did have a pretty good fish kill. I heard through the grapevine. I don't know, confirm it with any type of whatever you may think, but about 2,000 pounds of dead snook came out of Kings Bay.
Ow!
Yep,
That hurts.
Yep. That's pretty tough. So, Kings Bay, and that's a big warm water area, for here on the Big Bend. Here in the Homosassa area, I did notice, like, halfway out, like around the Hell's Gate area. So from anybody who's been around McRae's or Homosassa River, basically from McRae's, the Florida Cracker, or Crump's Landing is about 6 miles out to the mouth of the Gulf, and Hell's Gate's about halfway. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of, cold stunned snook. I mean, if you wanted to dip them or whatever you wanted to do. But some folks I talked to in Ozella down there, which has no springs or anything to protect those snook. One of the gentlemen I talked to this afternoon said that he had a couple that were around his dock that he dipped up, and he had them on his dock, and they were, thinking about, well, should we eat them or should we eat them? And then he said as they warmed up in the sun, they started flapping pretty hard on the dock. He put them back in the water. They kind of stunned up a little bit, but they took off.
Good.
So the thing was, if that's the part, being a stunned fish, and today, actually coming in from about 8 to 10 foot of water, I did see about 3 or 4 nice triple tail that were dead.
Ooh,
so,
ow.
Yep. Yeah. So it got cold. We had, about 3 days where at nights it was getting the 20s, and it did burn some mangroves. It did do some things. But, I know this is getting away from a good fishing report, but I believe that our area needs cold snaps like this every now and again to help, balance out what Mother Nature needs.
Yep. It's called balance, William. Yep. All right. Give me the good fishing report, buddy.
All right. Here's a good fishing report. You know what? Dress in layers and expect by 9:30 this weekend to be down in your T-shirt. And don't go scalloping. Don't fall in.
Nope.
The water temperature at about 8 to 10 foot of water today was 62. We got down last week down to 58. So that's pretty chilly, but it's warming up every day. So most all your fish, there's 2 ways they go here on the Big Bend. A lot of trout, redfish, snook, things like that will move east up the warm rivers, and I believe the other half move west. And when they go west, they go out to deeper water, 20 to 25, 30 feet of water, to where it doesn't change. So we're talking about like a, water that may get down to, say, the 60s, but it will not fluctuate like a shallow flat. And it can drop very, very quickly at night in 3 and 4 foot of water. So, a lot of these fish are getting back into the areas that we normally like. So if you want to get out this weekend, what I would suggest is fishing the edges of the Gulf. So if you're up at Steenahatchee, you're talking Hagen's Cove and up toward Keaton Beach, back down if you're getting toward Horseshoe, back along the shoreline. If you're at Cedar Key in the back country, back toward Wakasasa Bay at 11 Prong. And then when you get back down to Homosassa and everything, just on the outside, a lot of St. Martin's River, Mason Creek, and down in Chassahuisca. So they're on the edge. But don't expect it to be on fire. You got to slow your bait down. What we've been catching the trout on as of today was some nice D.O.A. 5.5-inch jerk baits.
Mm-hmm.
Trout sunning on shallow water on top of the rocks. Now, I did do a lot of sight casting at redfish, and a lot of them snubbed their nose, but I was on the outside, and I think I was a little too far out. The anglers I talked to today that did best on the redfish were back about midways up our creeks and rivers and using live shrimp, targeting deep holes, with a lot of oyster bars. I mean, there's a ton of them out there. And I always like to tell people, if you're really going to know our area, every once in a while before you go to sleep, put Google Earth on and look for those really deep spots. I know they're going to be hard to find, but it takes a little bit of effort to learn our area.
How about that? That's an outstanding tip that I got to be honest with you, I quite frankly had not thought of. An awful lot of guys now are buying Seymour maps, buying Florida marine tracks, that type stuff. But good old Google Earth will flat show you some of the stuff you're looking for, won't it? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely will. And I kind of like to look at it as, as far as like if you're in a new hunting area and you're looking for ridges or travel lanes or things, it's like this is a tool right now that I don't think a lot of anglers really use because it doesn't tell you exactly where to go. But as we all know who grew up hunting and fishing, no one's going to tell you exactly where to go. Well, you got to get out there and earn it.
It's not even that. And let me leave you with this. There's one thing you know about a secret fishing spot that any guy gives you. He's already caught the fish there, or he wouldn't have it as a great spot, right?
Exactly.
And as my daddy used to tell me every day, mighty hard to catch them fish already in somebody else's box, Cap.
I agree.
Yep.
I agree. And, it's kind of funny. Sometimes we have these winters where they seem to progress, but we just went from major cold where there's actually some mangroves out there that got burnt from the cold. You can see the brown tops out there. To right now, if you go outside, you want to wear shorts and a T-shirt. So the up and downs and everything are just kind of, it throws everybody off. Even me, guiding every day, I have to be on top of my toes and looking. But I can tell you what I would suggest that any angler that fishes the Big Bend may want to start thinking about where you fished at the beginning of March.
All right. What's special about the beginning of March?
Well, if you're around this area, the beginning of March is the same area as I explained about. It's got to be on rocky points,
right,
near the edge of the Gulf, and the water temperature would be about the same. As always, my grandfather told me.
I see.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. My grandfather told me, like in our area, a bad wind is a northwestern. And you get a northwestern coming off of Texas and Louisiana, it kind of slams our curve. That's the only kind of big wind we get. And when it does, it pushes a lot of water, but it also, when it swings around northeast, that is when our temperatures drop big time. And so you get fish that have tons of water that get to move around to different areas. And then when the wind lets off and you feel it's safe to get out there and go do some fishing, it scatters them everywhere.
Gotcha.
So I'm just, just as, I've been fishing it for 22 years as a guide and pretty much my whole life out there. So I'm thinking like beginning of March, because March always comes in with a howling wind. And so, if you fish enough in this area and know the area, then think about March where you caught fish. That may help you.
You're right. You're right. It's my least favorite month of the year, but we're going to fish then too. All right. Thank you, William. We appreciate it, buddy. We'll talk with you next week if that's okay.
I'll be right here in downtown Homosassa, Rick.
All right. You keep them straight for 2023, okay?
I absolutely will.
All right, Cap. Thanks. Cap William Toney. Our thanks to William Toney for all the news from Homosassa. Now let's move up into Northwest and check in with Captain Kevin Lanier from KC Sport Fishing. How are we doing, Cap?
Hey, Captain Rick, we're doing really good. However, we can't quite decide whether it's wintertime or summertime.
I can tell you last week.
29 last week.
I can tell you what it was last week. Does that help?
I know. It was 29 last week. It was 76 today. Go figure.
Yep. We never got out of the fog today. Boy, I wish it had been clear. Whew, buddy, yeah. I mean, it was socked in, and that made for chilly while you're out there. I mean, you're standing there fishing, and the water is actually dropping off of the visor of your cap just because there's so much fog building up on you. Tell me what's been going on when you're fishing this week.
Well, we've been able to get out a little bit. One of our guys that works with us got out 2 days this week and limited on grouper both days out 60 feet of water.
Oh,
So,
good day.
well, last week of gags. We all got some fresh gag to eat. In fact, I had that for dinner tonight.
Well, I had fresh sea bass, so there.
Okay, I'll take my dinner. I appreciate your effort.
You got it. You got it. Well, that's really good news. Now, you've wrapped up the grouper season for 2022. What did you think of it?
It always, I try to tell people all the time, November, December is really the true best time to get down here for grouper fishing.
Sure.
I mean, we struggle to look for them all summer. We lose them to sharks and everything like that. But when that water cools off like it does this time of year, to give away a little secret, we caught them trolling. So it was pretty interesting.
Cool. That is cool.
Yep. So, and there's been some redfish around, when guys can get out, the fishing's been productive. It's not super red hot, but, guys put in their time, they're catching fish.
Okay. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. All right. Looks like this warming trend looked to you like it's here to stay a few days.
Yeah, it looks like it'll be here through they were calling for rain this week, but the rain really hasn't materialized, and but it looks like it's going to be warm and nice for a few more days for sure.
Yeah, good deal. We'll take advantage of it while we can. Thank you so much, Kevin. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
We'll be back here next week with bells on.
Captain Kevin Lanier from KC Sport Fishing. Our thanks to Kevin Lanier for our report from KC Sport Fishing. Now let's move out to the very tip of Florida. Just if you step one step past Tyler Massey's house, you're in Alabama. That's where you are. Tyler, tell me how fishing's going on out there.
So fishing's been pretty good. We had a little cold snap, and now it's warming back up a little bit. Typical Florida winter for us up here. But fishing's been pretty good. We're catching mostly inshore fishing right now. The inshore bite, we're catching some speckled trout in the canals still. You can also catch them in the mouths of the river, any of the bayous. But the canals and the intercoastal are a little bit easier to find the fish. They're pretty narrow. And it's just an easier area to fish than a big bayou. But focus on the centers of the the canals, and the deeper part, and we're going to use live shrimp. You can free line them or fish them under a float or an artificial lure, D.O.A. shrimp, mirror lure, mirrodine. You can use a soft plastic. A lot of things work. Not a huge size trout, but a lot of bites, a lot of numbers of fish, which is a lot of fun. We've been doing that pretty good. And then also we've been catching some redfish still. And like I've said before, there's a wreck that's out in the Gulf, pretty close to maybe 2 miles from the pass. And the redfish have just been stacked up on it, kind of tide dependent on the bite. Incoming tide seems to be working, a little bit better for the bite out there, but it's been pretty consistent and, pretty good fishing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I would assume that nobody's made it offshore very far lately.
Not too far, but just some regular bottom fishing. As we get into the new year here, we're losing our trigger fish is going to close. Scamp grouper is going to close outside of 20 fathoms. So we're slim pickings are what you can keep right now. The fishing's great. A lot of amberjacks are biting. They're feisty this time of year. Just got to let them go. There's nice snappers around. Vermilion snappers have been, our go-to for keepers out in the Gulf. A few Almaco jacks and some porgies and that kind of stuff mixed in. But the bottom fishing's pretty good. There's not a whole lot we can bring back to the dock.
Gotcha. Yeah. We've closed our grouper over here, too. I haven't caught any inshore in such a long time, months and months and months and months. So today I went sea bass jigging, probably the second jig down. I had about a 14-pound red grouper on it. So I give up. I can't get it right, Tyler. I tell you what, I couldn't have caught him last week. All right, buddy. Well,
no doubt.
Well, look, that sounds good. I hope you had a great 22, and I sure wanted to wish you and your family and everybody a happy new year out there. And Cap, we'll talk to you next week if that's okay.
Perfect, Rick. Same to you. We'll see you.
Thank you, Tyler. And that's going to wrap up our trip around the state of Florida for tonight. Well, we didn't do much on the East Coast. Leiza Fitzgerald brought us just this great news. I so enjoyed our interview with her. She's from CCA. And about some of the positive things they're doing. They've released 100,000 redfish in the Indian River Lagoon area. That's fantastic news. They're rebuilding clam beds, they're rebuilding oyster beds, which is very important. If our waterway is going to get any better, that's where it has to start. And we've got to pay attention to it every single day from now on. We have done far too much damage, even for the people who have always lived here. Man, now that this place seems to be a one-way ticket to paradise and everybody wants to be here, we've got to double down on our efforts to take care of the environment. I hope you enjoyed this evening. Next week, we'll go back to our standard format. We'll have a question for the boys all down the East Coast and up the West Coast as well and find out how their fishing has been. So we're off to 2023. I know I've had a great 2022, and I promise I've enjoyed each and every week. If you want to make a comment about the podcast or ask us a question, leave a question for any of our experts in a specific area, please do. Just go to floridasportsman.com, or you can email me at rick@floridasportsman.com. Florida Sportsman Action Spotter is brought to you this week and every week by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people and nature together. By Tournament Master Chum. It's the best chum on earth, all right. By Nosara Paradise Rentals, your dream vacation. By D.O.A. Lures, the unfair advantage. By Young Boats, you want the finest in flats, bay, and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. By Castaway Hat Company, the hat that's helping save our seas. And by Academy Sports and Outdoors, right stuff, low price, every day. We will be back next week with another Action Spotter podcast. Until then, we'll see you on the rig.